When my uncle first got the iPad mini 2 way back in the day, when he got it from his work, I went over to his house, played with the iPad, and I was like, I want one of these. It's crazy. The iPad 2 introduced cameras, introduced a much less chunky design, and made the iPad more of a family device as opposed to a personal one, as you could use those cameras in a family environment. And of course, the iPad is slimmer, it's sleeker, and it fits better. So hey guys, my name's Ryan Thomas with Failtech, and this is the iPad 2. Should you still buy one in 2018 and beyond? Let's first talk about that design. We've come on fairly far from the first and second generations of iPad. Of course, the bezels were much larger back in the day, although I personally really like this because it enables you to hold the iPad in kind of a more loosey-goosey style, whether you're in portrait or landscape, because of course you've got that thick side and top bottom bezel as well, which is really cool, and I personally am a fan of that in a tablet. Maybe not in a mobile phone, but in a large 9.7 inch tablet like this, I actually really like the larger bezel. The edges are more sweeping compared to the first generation, and it appears a lot thinner than the first generation, which is nice, but of course we've kind of got that more rounded edges and more flat back on the more modern iPad designs. The screen is kind of where it is, the camera is the same place as it always has been. However, the home button is, well, it's a home button. There's no Touch ID here, which is something a lot of people might dislike. In an iPad, I personally don't find this to be a problem. I've kind of said this in the past about iPads and iPad mini 2s when I've talked about those on the channel, but the designs I feel aren't that bad, especially when you consider the fact that it's an iPad, it's not a personal device, usually it's something you use within a family, so any kind of Face ID or Touch ID isn't necessarily needed here. There's no microSD expansion, as with pretty much any Apple mobile device, and of course we don't have any kind of IP68 or IP67 water and dust resistance, which is kind of okay because again, it's not one of those things you're going to be taking to the beach or to the park or anywhere like that. It's just, again, it's kind of like a home family iPad, so I wouldn't expect it here. Now, I just want to talk about software because it's one of its main points. When this iPad came out, it had iOS 4 on it. That's it, iOS 4, but you can update it to 9.3.5, which is the latest that this iPad will go. It won't go further than this. Now, the design of iOS 9.3.5 is okay. It's actually not that bad. It's fairly modern looking, but of course it's nothing compared to iOS 11, and its functionality is actually pretty good. Again, it's something that I don't feel is that bad. I mean, yes, 9.3.5 is old, but it's not like iOS 6 or iOS 7, so it's really alright. He uses his iPad still for emails, and that's something you can easily do on a device like this, even with this old software. Now, for specification, this is something that's pretty crazy. A 1 GHz dual-core Apple A5 chip and half a gigabyte of RAM. These specs it just almost makes me laugh. Those specs in a tablet with a fairly large screen and of course almost seemingly more horsepower than necessarily something that's smaller like a smartphone is something that's just crazy to me. Of course, half a gig of RAM is nothing at this level, and a 1 GHz dual core chip, again, it's nothing. There's a good reason that this iPad stops at 9.3.5. And even within 9.3.5, this thing is slow. It is really slow, it's buggy, it crashes, there's a lot of waiting. It's really crazy. If you're really into like text-based stuff, maybe writing emails, writing text documents, anything like this, then maybe go for this, but there are so many better options for the price. It's just crazy how slow it is compared to when we first got it and how fast and amazing the experience was. It comes in 16, 32 or 64 gigabytes of storage, which in my opinion isn't a lot for a tablet because on a tablet you tend to store films and music and kind of more multimedia, games and stuff like that, so you kind of need more onboard storage, which again is something that the more modern iPads have with a much larger base storage configuration. And as previously mentioned, you don't get any kind of card storage. So the rear camera is 0.7 megapixels. Yeah, that's right, 0.7 megapixels. Now this is a crazy low resolution, as I remember my Sony Ericsson back in the day having a 3 megapixel camera. So 0.7 is just absolutely dreadful, and I would not recommend taking photos with the tablet already. 0.7 megapixels, absolutely not. The front camera, it doesn't even tell me the resolution, it just says it's VGA, so it's probably going to be something like 480p or 565p, and again, really not very good. In fact, the rear camera on this device didn't work when I tried to test it on my setup, which was kind of crazy. It just wouldn't load the camera. It would load the front camera, but not the rear camera. The battery is an almost 7,000 mAh cell. It's one that I actually find is okay. Like, it really isn't that bad. It's 6,950 mAh, there's no fast charging, and you do use that ancient old long dot connector, which is something we haven't seen for many, many years now, and it's quite funny just looking at it because it's just such a beefy and inconvenient connector. You do get a headphone jack, and you get a mono speaker on the bottom. These inconsistencies in the Apple design, when the iPhone 5 was introduced, we got a reversible connector, we got stereo and quad speakers on the more modern iPads, and everything like that has just changed incredibly. The battery actually lasts pretty much all day, or 2 days, or 3 days. iOS's standby time is really efficient and I really like it. However, extended periods of use when watching films or anything like that on Netflix and YouTube, it's going to give you a fairly poor experience and something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend for someone who's really power using their iPad. But for anyone like my uncle who just uses it to read email sometimes, maybe video call once in a while because of course the front camera is the only one that works, and stuff like that, it's a fairly good device. The low resolution non-retina display on the front is one that I personally don't like. It's really unresponsive when using the touchscreen, don't know why that is. Its colours are okay, but really doesn't get bright enough, and it's not sharp in the slightest. It is nowhere near sharp enough for me to be considered good nowadays. And for £85, all of these shortcomings put together, I mean, there are just so many better options that I would recommend you pick. On eBay, anything like the iPad Mini 2, the iPad Air 1, these are all going for stupid prices now. Of course, the Nexus 7, the Nexus 7 second gen, which came with a really high resolution display, these would all be really good options compared to something like an iPad 2. It's something I really cannot recommend, but at the same time, it's kind of fun to go back and have a look at these older products. I really enjoy reviewing these older devices that maybe necessarily aren't the Samsung Galaxies or the iPhones of the world. An old iPad or an old computer or anything like that. It's just really fun to look at and just see, back then, like I said at the start of the video, I was so impressed at this iPad 2 and how cool it was. And now, well, even my Galaxy S3 and Galaxy S4s of the world can perform better than that, and they're tiny little smartphones for around the same price. Anyway guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. It's something a bit different. I haven't checked out the iPad 2 before, and I wanted to release something a bit newer for you guys. I want to thank everyone for the recent support on the videos, and yeah, I recommend that you like, dislike, comment and subscribe if you're new around here, to leave any of your thoughts in the comments, and like I said, like or dislike, so I can see if you like or dislike this content. I want to thank Ross Baldwin for sponsoring me on Patreon, and if there are any companies that you want me to check out low end or cheap gear, then shoot them over a tweet or something and tag me in it, and we'll see if we can get something going. Anyway guys, my name's been Ryan Thomas from Failtech. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.